Federal politics was dominated this week by the government's Commission of Audit, the decision to raise the country's credit limit and the ongoing debate about MPs' expenses. The bushfires sparked a fierce debate about climate change. There was plenty to talk about when I was joined earlier from Canberra by the Shadow Assistant Treasurer Andrew Leigh and from Melbourne by the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Josh Frydenberg. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks, nice to be with you.
If I can start with you, Josh Frydenberg. 6 months ago, Tony Abbott was talking about a budget emergency. He said the public finances were in crisis and that the country's debt position was unsustainable. There was a real sense of urgency. But now that you're in government, there's no plans to cut spending at all. Instead, you're increasing your credit limit.
That's not right. We are actually looking for savings right across the board, and we're increasing our debt ceiling because the government has inherited from Labor $300 billion of debt. Let's not forget, Emma, we bequeathed the Labor government a pristine balance sheet. We left them $70 billion in the bank and zero government debt. What we've inherited is $300 billion of debt, and our debt ceiling will be blown through in December this year. So when you look to the United States and the difficulties they had in lifting their debt ceiling, when you look at the cold winds through Europe and other parts of the world, Australia cannot take its economic position for granted. So what we've decided to do is to lift the debt ceiling as a prudent economic measure, but we must get the budget back into the black, and we'll do that by finding savings right across the board.
Andrew Leigh?
Well, Emma, before the election, Mr Hockey said that if debt is the problem, more debt isn't the answer. Now he seems to think it's appropriate to double the national debt limit. Those two positions seem pretty contradictory to me. So, as Eminem would say, would the real Joe Hockey please stand up?
Josh, you talked about the Commission of Audit that will identify potential government spending cuts. When does the government intend to act on the recommendations that will come? And will you manage to deliver a surplus earlier than Labor intended to?
Well, look, the Commission of Audit is going to do a detailed analysis of the state of the books, and it's long overdue, and it's going to be led by Tony Shepherd, a business leader of the highest regard. I don't want to preempt the findings of that Commission of Audit, other than to say it's got some top people, former Treasury Secretary, other senior state bureaucrats, and it's well qualified to come up with some good recommendations. Joe Hockey and Tony Abbott will respond to those recommendations in due course, but we're well aware of the difficulties we face in trying to bring the budget back to surplus in the near term, but we're very confident that with the required spending cuts, with our other measures which can actually grow the economy, like cutting the carbon tax and abolishing the mining tax, those things will actually start to spur growth in the economy, and hopefully we can bring the budget back into balance. But I must say, Emma, Labor never was going to ever deliver a budget surplus. I mean, Andrew was at high school, I was at high school the last time the Labor Party delivered a budget surplus. We had very good record when we were in government. We delivered 10 budget surpluses. We know what to do to deliver a budget surplus. Labor was never ever going to deliver one.
But if I can just draw you back to my original question, which was about the urgency, the language around emergency and crisis. You did create an impression that when you came to government you would act quickly to remedy the budget situation.
Well, we are. I mean, when you talk about abolishing the carbon tax, when you're talking about abolishing the mining tax, the legislation which is being prepared to introduce in the first session, they're actually going to be pro-growth measures. And we saw a massive deterioration, Emma, in the state.
But they take away from revenue, don't they?
No. What they're going to do is grow the economy, because they're going to reduce the cost on business. And don't forget, it's business, not government, that creates jobs.
And Josh is talking about how they're going to get out of the budget emergency, and apparently the way the coalition get out of the budget emergency is by getting rid of taxes. Now, the only way of doing that is to repeal the one law that Mr Abbott isn't going to get through Parliament, which is the law of maths. Repealing taxes means less revenue for the government, so if you were serious about a budget emergency, then you wouldn't be giving a big tax cut to Gina Rinehart and Clive Palmer.
Part of the coalition's attack on Labor when you were in opposition, Josh, was that they were profligate, not careful with money. Couldn't the same accusation now be levelled at members of your government, like Don Randall, who spent $5,000 of taxpayers' money to fly from Western Australia to Cairns with his wife? Now we hear the pair also went on a government-funded trip to Melbourne for an AFL match.
Look, I think you'll find with this issue of entitlements that it is a grey area, Emma, and MPs should err on the side of caution, and where there is a mistake that's been made, pay that money back. And I understand there have been more than 60 instances on the Labor side of MPs, including Julia Gillard herself, who had to pay money back to the Department of Finance. So, this is an issue where there is a grey area, and I don't want to prejudge Don Randall in this case, because there are plenty on the Labor side who have made similar claims and have paid money back.
Do you agree Don Randall has questions to answer?
No, I don't. And Don Randall has spoken publicly about it, and he claims that his travel was completely legitimate. I did notice that he did pay some of that money back.
But he hasn't explained, with respect, he hasn't explained what the electoral business he refers to actually was, beyond saying he held meetings with the coalition whip at the time, Warren Entsch. He doesn't say the nature of those meetings, why they needed to be conducted in person, and why, in fact, his wife had to be present.
Well, some things are confidential, and at that end of the day, you've just got to trust those MPs, dare I say it, to use their best judgment. And by and large, MPs adhere to these rules of entitlement very well. There have been some examples where wrong claims have been made, Emma, and that money has been paid back. But it's a pox on both houses, dare I say it.
Andrew Lee, Labor commissioned a review into MPs' expense claims back in 2010. That review called for the rules to be tightened. Was it a mistake for your government to have ignored that?
Well, Emma, I think there's certainly a sensible conversation that can be had with the government if they're serious about tightening rules now. But don't forget the situation we're in comes largely as a result of Mr Abbott spending the last Parliament calling in the Australian Federal Police every time there was any concern over a crossbencher potentially misusing their entitlements. With Mr Randall, you've got Mr Abbott and Mr Randall offering different explanations as to why this meeting took place. You've got Mr Randall claiming for sittings of Parliament in Melbourne, a town in which the Federal Parliament hasn't sat since 1927. And you've got Mr Abbott refusing to repay the costs of flying to Port Macquarie to participate in a private sporting event. Now, the Prime Minister said that he was attending meetings there, but according to Laura Tingle's column today, the only other business he appears to have conducted is to hold a Liberal Party fundraiser. Now, that's party business, not something that the taxpayer ought to be paying for. You've got Liberal Party cabinet members, now 4 of them, who've used taxpayer funds to fly to weddings. It's pretty strange when you've got Attorney General George Brandis. He's got a mate's wedding on. He thinks the taxpayer should pick up the tab. 2 blokes want to get married. He's the first one to go to the High Court and try and rip up their wedding certificate. Pretty strange stuff.
We'll get to that. We conflated a few issues there, but we're going to run out of time if we don't try to touch on a few other issues. Let's turn to the thorny debate of whether there's a link between climate change and the fires. Josh Frydenberg, the Prime Minister, has said in an interview that drawing that link between global warming and the bushfires is hogwash. Do you agree with him?
Well, actually, that's not right, Emma. If you look at the detail of that interview with Andrew Bolt put to him a question which was around what the ABC had been reporting, that fires had not occurred in October. And we know that fires have occurred in October.
Can I correct you, actually? No. The reporting was about what the fire chiefs had said about the intensity and the amount of damage happening in October.
No. And in fact, as you may know, in 1928, Sydney was encircled by fires in October.
No, and this is I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the fire chiefs themselves have said this week that they haven't seen damage to property by fires in October before. That is to completely give them the full quote there.
Well, we actually do know that Sydney was encircled by fires, according to reports back that time in 1928. I mean, the key point here is that these fires are not the response to climate change, or are not due to climate change. And anybody who tries to make that claim is not only scientifically wrong, but morally repugnant. And Adam Bandt's comments were absolutely outrageous when he described Tony Abbott of putting on the overalls to go and volunteer as a firefighter as a con, because Tony Abbott was...
Let's not confuse the issues, though. Let's not confuse the issues, because I think what we want to directly establish is whether you accept the words of the UN's climate change chief, of Al Gore, and in fact today the Climate Council findings that repeat both of those people in saying that global warming is making hot days hotter and heat waves more frequent and severe, and that increases the risks of fire.
Look, I do accept that there are impacts of climate change, and this debate is not about the science. The point here is, during a time when Australians are fighting these terrible bushfires and lives are on the line, 2,500 firefighters bravely fighting these fires in New South Wales, this is not a time to enter the debate with partisan political points, and Adam Bandt did that. And
no,
that's why
I'm not talking about Adam Bandt with respect. I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about the issue of the carbon tax versus direct action or anything else. I'm talking specifically about whether we do need to be having a debate about whether climate change is having an impact on the numbers of fires that are occurring.
Well, this is not the time for that debate, Emma, to be, with
Isn't
the
this
greatest
exactly
respect.
the time?
No, it's not. I mean, we've got a, national emergency, really, if you think about the extent of those fires and the damage that's being lost and the lives that are being threatened. And we just need to rally behind those communities and ensure that, people's property and lives are saved. And, Tony Abbott has been out there, as he has been for a decade or more, fighting those fires as a volunteer. Now, to actually make the case that those fires are due to climate change, I think is wrong. And scientists have actually also made that point with great respect, Emma. Now, we do not disagree with the science of climate change. That's why we are investing taxpayers' money in a response to that. But, what other commentators have sought to do is to use this event to make a cheap partisan political point, and that I find repugnant.
Andrew Lee?
Well, I'd certainly give Mr Abbott his due for volunteering as a volunteer bushfighter. My father was also a volunteer bushfighter, and I think that's great and important work for the community. I've certainly read the Climate Council's review of the peer-reviewed literature, which where they report the link between climate change and extreme weather events. But I do think that in a week in which fires are ravaging homes, it's important that we're sensitive to this debate. I do, though, think that we need to recognise that climate change is the reason why we've just had the hottest summer on record. It's the reason we've had the hottest winter on record. And getting rid of a carbon price, which is already reducing electricity emissions, is economically and environmentally irresponsible. The Coalition want to replace it with direct action, but the way in which they're hiding direct action, they've decided they're going to put it inside the budget bills as a sort of poison pill. Effectively, this is a Tea Party tactic where they say, nice economy you got there, shame if anything happened to it. And they basically dare the rest of the Parliament to either vote down their direct action scheme, backed by no serious economists.
With respect to you, Andrew, this isn't the same, because the Tea Party's not their wider party are not in government at the moment, whereas the people you're talking about actually do hold the keys to the government.
It's the same practical
and we
effect.
are running out of time, so I wanted to go to one more thing, and that is the passage of the ACT's new bill legalising same-sex marriage. The Prime Minister's sister announced her engagement to her same-sex partner and said a federal change in the law is a question of when, not if. Do you agree, Andrew?
Absolutely. I think this is an issue whose time has come. I certainly respect the different views on either sides of the same-sex marriage debate, but as I stood there in the ACT this week with loving couples, young and old, looking forward to tying the knot, I couldn't feel anything but a sense of jubilation for them. The ACT has passed a law to allow same-sex marriage as a result of the Howard government in 2004 restricting the Federal Marriage Act to say that it only covered heterosexual marriages. So that's then left the field open for the ACT to step in and pass this same-sex marriage law. This is a political issue, and I find it very strange that Senator Brandis wants to challenge it not in the Parliament of Australia, the proper place to debate this, but to take the very odd step of having the federal government challenge this ACT law in the High Court, effectively trying to annul same-sex marriages. It's a pretty heartless thing to do, all the more so from a bloke who, as I said before, is happy to use taxpayer funds to fly to mates' weddings.
Josh?
Look, this is a legal question, and George Brandis, the Attorney-General, has received advice from the Acting Commonwealth Solicitor-General that the laws passed by the ACT are inconsistent with the Commonwealth Marriage Act, and that's why this will be tested in the High Court as soon as possible. So this is about ensuring the consistency of the laws. As for whether the actual laws will change, Emma, and gay marriage will be allowed in Australia, that will be up to discussions and decisions in the Parliament in the future. We have said that as a party we'll have that discussion in the party room, but it's up to the individuals who are elected by their own electorates to come to the floor of the Parliament and to make their own
Personally, do
decision.
you hope it happens during your term of government?
Well, I've actually supported the status quo, although I have publicly supported a conscience vote on this issue. But that's a debate that will be decided by the coalition party room. And like Andrew, I respect views on both sides of this debate because they are passionately held.
Josh Frydenberg, Andrew Lee, we have to leave it there. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks,
Josh.
Andrew.